Hello, Blenders, and welcome to episode 159 of Real Blend, a podcast that believes that Kill Bill is one film, Forrest Gump is a worthy Best Picture winner, and Lord of the Rings is one hell of an incredible trilogy of films. On this week's show, we have a lot to cover. The SAG Awards took place on Sunday, which both solidified and shook up the Oscar race a little bit. Godzilla vs. Kong opened to big numbers at the box office, a sign that HBO Max deal may be working out well for everyone. And we are very excited to be joined by the director of the new film Voyagers, Mr. Neil Berger. And when I say we, I mean me. Jake Hamilton. I am filling in for Sean O'Connell, who is somehow old enough to have a son on college visits, so that's what he's doing this week, which blows my mind. Gabe Kovac is filling in this week. He's stepping in, and we're going to be hearing that beautiful, beautiful timbre a little bit more than we normally do. Gabe, how are you?
I'm good. I'm kind of filling in for you. You're filling in for Sean. I'm filling in for you. It's like we're doing a little musical chairs.
You are not nearly annoying enough to be filling in for my spot. So the real question is, if you're filling in for me and there's no you, that means the third person here today, Mr. Kevin McCarthy, will receive no raps. Kevin, you get to talk as long as you want.
Kevin's filling in for me, so you're recording everything, right? You got this. You got the whole tech side.
I'm recording everything. I have everything planned out, and I think Last Jedi is a masterpiece. So yes.
Perfect. This is perfect.
Wouldn't it be alright, if Kevin actually just halfway through the show just kept thinking God, the show goes on way too long. We really need to just start wrapping all of this stuff up.
Yeah.
This is like one of those episodes of a sitcom where they do a weird flashback and they're like, what if everything was different?
Yeah.
What if everyone did a different role? This is our episode.
Kevin, how you doing, buddy?
Good to see you guys. Doing good. Gabe, good to see you. Jake, good to see you guys as well. Excited to talk about Ghostbusters because that clip was pretty weird. So we're gonna get into that in our topics of discussion. But
yeah.
I'm looking forward to our Godzilla vs. Kong discussion as well because I know that Gabe saw it. I know that we are kind of split as a show on that film. So I'm very interested to see kind of where we land.
Before we get to our weekly poll, which has to do with Godzilla vs. Kong, I will handle housekeeping duties to just let the folks at home know that if you're watching us, hello, thank you. Like, subscribe, turn on the notifications. If you're just listening to us and you want to see us, head to youtube.com/RealBlendPodcast and check us out. Of course, we're available wherever you get your podcasts. You can find us there. And if you haven't yet signed up for Real Blend Premium, you get ad-free versions of the show, and you get a bonus segment every Monday morning at bit.ly/RealBlendPremium. Check us out anywhere you can.
That's awesome.
When it comes to the weekly poll this week, it's a question that was made all the more interesting by just how well Godzilla vs. Kong did at the box office. And we're going to touch on that a little bit later in the show. But before we get into that, the weekly poll question was, how do you actually plan to watch Godzilla vs. Kong? The three options were in a theater, on HBO Max at home, or just if you want to be a party pooper, I'm not watching. Kevin, I'm going to let you guess, if only because Gabe created the graphic that goes in the show notes. So he knows the answer already. What do you think a majority of our listeners voted for?
I mean, considering the show that we do, it's a weird answer because we're in the middle of a pandemic, so I have to adjust this for the where we are. I would still assume, based on the numbers the movie made this weekend at the box office in its first 5 days, which we'll get into in our news, that our listeners said theaters. But I would not be surprised if it was split a little bit more on the other side because we are in a pandemic. Vaccines are rolling out, so it's really kind of like one of those things where if this was a normal situation, I would say theaters, no question.
Yeah.
I would have agreed with you, and especially after seeing the box office numbers from this past weekend, I would have thought that would have solidified what you just said. 50.5% said they were going to watch it on HBO Max.
Okay.
Which still makes sense. I mean, at the end of the day, It is a massive blockbuster that people don't have to leave their couch for. Almost evenly split between in a theater and I'm not watching, which really is making me wonder who voted on this poll. When you consider just how well the movie did, both domestically and internationally.
Yeah.
Almost 26% of people said they were going to watch it in a theater, and almost 24% of people said that they just weren't watching, period. Who listens to this show and doesn't want to see at least see Godzilla vs. Kong?
Well, I mean, to give our audience some credit in that sense, the last 3 films, besides from Kong Skull Island, the rest of them have been pretty bad. Like I mean, in the sense of like Godzilla 2014 with Bryan Cranston wasn't great. King of Monsters wasn't great. Kong Skull Island to me was a film that showed true promise, which is why as I revisited this film, I do like how that's tied in the beginning specifically, and we'll dive into that later on because I rewatched it a second time and I have some different thoughts than I did initially. But yeah, I'm surprised. I don't know. Are there people that are just really want to watch all the Godzilla movies? Like, are people like obsessed with it like a Star Wars, or is it more of like just a blockbuster film? It came out at the right time. It's a big action film. I mean, I was looking at some of the numbers. I don't know if we can dive into some of the numbers now in news if it's possible, but
we're gonna do that after the Neil Berger interview.
Well, then I'll dive deeper into this discussion as we get later.
I'll second you and say that I don't blame people for kind of already being out on the whole MonsterVerse, Legendary MonsterVerse, after the last movie in particular.
Yeah.
I'll get into why I think you should watch this one when we discuss it later, but I do think that this is better than the last one. So if anyone listening thought they weren't going to watch it, but they're in the mood for like a nice, fun action movie, I think you would.
Yeah.
Maybe that's why the HBO Max numbers are so high, because people's sort of attitude toward the past few were, well,
they're
it's not
sure
great,
it's gonna be great.
And so like I'm not going to rush out to go see it. We'll talk a little bit more about that because I think we have a wide range of opinions when it comes to that movie. But first, we have a very special guest on the show. Mr. Neil Berger, a director who has directed really a wide range of different kinds of movies. His new movie, Voyagers, hits theaters on Friday. I've been describing it maybe too simplistically so as kind of like a space Lord of the Flies. And there are a lot of elements to that, but it also seems like Neil wants to expand beyond that structure a little bit. Kevin, I thought this was a good interview. We don't always get to get all 3 guys, but it was nice that we had everybody take part in this one.
Yeah, the only thing I'm bummed I didn't bring up to him is Limitless, because I really dig that film, and I think that he, and you'll hear in the interview as we talk to him for Voyagers, we cover Divergent and and the Illusionist and the topic.
You asked a great question about what happens when 2 very similar movies come out at the same time, which I've always wondered about. So I'm really glad that you brought that up.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, the Deep Impact, Armageddon, Illusionist, Prestige element.
Dante's Peak, Volcano.
Right. Yeah. There's always that weird. It always happens like
usually maybe once every 5 years. There were 2 Snow White movies that came out.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting because I love The Illusionist, but I also love The Prestige. So Neil Berger has a very interesting career. He also gives us an update, by the way, if we're gonna ever get that 4th Divergent movie, which I'm trying to figure out in Hollywood. Has that ever happened before, where they made a franchise and just didn't finish the last film?
The last I heard about it was because it was sort of a diminishing returns on the sequels. Right. There were rumors that there was going to be a TV series and that was going to make up. And then Shailene Woodley was very publicly against it. I think even her quote was like, "I didn't sign up for a TV show whenever I signed on for this character," which is entirely fair. Entirely fair.
Because a TV movie is a completely different budget and set of circumstances to make a movie than,
and also like,
are
there people out there like really clamoring for the 4th Divergent movie? I mean I'm sure we will awaken the sleeping giant, but are there really? Is there a crowd out there for it?
Well, let's see what Neil Berger thinks.
Yeah, Neil's going to bring it up, and one of the things I think he says that's interesting that people can listen for, and then we'll discuss it on the other side, is he says he told the studio that I wanted 1 film for the 3rd book, not divided into 2, but you'll hear why he had to divide it into 2 in the interview, and that's what you call a tease.
That's what you call a tease in the biz, children. All right, well, until we hit you on the other side, enjoy our conversation with director Neil Berger. I'm going to get us started. Obviously, when it comes to movies that are set in space, there's almost no limit to the different genres and the different examples you have to look at over decades worth of filmmaking. As a filmmaker, when you're looking at a decades worth of film set in space, what are some aspects of filmmaking that you realize worked, and what are aspects of filmmaking you realize didn't work? Lessons that you learned on maybe what to do and what not to do.
Well, I think that for this movie, Voyagers, I was trying to make it feel it's fiction, but trying to make it feel as realistic as possible and base it on reality, because I felt like the themes at the core of the story about human nature were, I was really interested in them, and they were true and real. And so I wanted it to have a basis in reality. And so, I mean, in a way, you kind of go right to 2001, where it feels utterly real, yet there's still kind of an element of spectacle to it. Other movies that are more, I don't know, where they're on some massive platform, where it's not, they just sort of are out there for some reason, where they're more sort of fantasy based, was sort of less interesting to me. And I sort of didn't, you kind of look at those because you want to understand the tropes of the form. And we obviously do deal with that in terms of the alien and aspects of like that. And you try not to, or you want to use the things that work and not repeat the things that don't. So anyway, that's kind of what, I try to look at everything, but then the ones that I was interested in were, the sort of reality-based ones.
Neil, your filmography is so interesting to me because you've written and directed some of the films you've made, and then there's films you've just directed that you did not write. The first movie you ever did, Interview with the Assassin, that was a movie you wrote and directed. You wrote and directed Voyagers, obviously, The Illusionist. So I'm just wondering for you, what is the difference in directing a film that you wrote versus a film you didn't write? And is there a different process? Because I would imagine writing the material gives you a closer sense to it, obviously. But I mean, when you read a script and direct it, you're going to feel close to it too. But what's the difference for you? Can you maybe give an example from a film you wrote?
Yeah, I mean, I do feel close to all of them, and they're all personal in a way, or I wouldn't do them. Even a movie like Divergent, which is about a young woman, or kind of growing into herself. It's interesting to me because, thematically, even though the movies are completely different, thematically, there's something that's interesting to me about, like, are you doomed to be, one thing? Are you fated to be one thing? Or can you change? Can you be something else? And in terms of that movie, it's, can she go from being this sort of country mouse into being something, sort of this badass warrior? And that's obviously is kind of like this dystopic fantasy. But even in Interview with the Assassin, it's the same thing. It's like both of these people kind of want to matter in the world. And so they are kind of crossing the line in different ways and in order to be somehow important in the world, in their own minds. So, I mean, obviously the ones that I've written, I probably do feel like those are more my babies, and they're more, they were things that I was kind of ruminating on for a while and then made into something. So I suppose I'm closer to them, but it's interesting because and I've talked about this before, there's kind of a tyranny of the original idea, meaning that, like, if you saw that this scene has to take place in a church, or something. And which is fine. And that's, you go and you do that, and maybe it works and maybe it doesn't work. But when you're reading a script, when you've been presented as, somebody else's work, when you are really coming into a project as a director, which is a interpretive role by definition, you have the ability to interpret it. So if on the page it's like, well, this takes place in a church, and you're like, actually, it might be better in a warehouse or something like that. And you might be right, actually, and that the original author, or, if I had written something, was going to direct it, it might be better to take it in that other direction.
Or they come back and say, we can't get a church, Neil.
Well, you can't get a church, and then you're just going out of your mind if you've written the thing and it must be a church. Whereas if you come into it as a director and you're like, probably shouldn't even be a church, So,
Neil, I'm gonna follow up on this real fast, only because you brought up Divergent. I know this is a question you've probably been asked a million times, but do you think we'll ever get the fourth film in some shape or form? I mean, I know you only did the first movie, but there are a lot of people out there, like my wife included, who are a big fan of that series, and it just like it's crazy to me that it just stopped. And I was just do you think we'll ever get
I don't. I mean, I suppose it's possible, but I don't think, if you're asking me whether I think it's really going to happen, I don't. And it's a shame in a way, because, it should have been, there were 3 books and it should have been 3. And I think, Lionsgate is distributing Voyagers, and I love the people at Lionsgate, and it's actually sort of a different maybe a different group now. But at the time, I think I said to them, it's just do 3. Don't try to, they had split. Harry Potter split their final episode,
Twilight.
Episode. Twilight. They all split Games. It into 2 for the end. And I was like, it didn't need to be, and it shouldn't have been. And I don't think the third one, which I guess I'm an executive producer on, but I wasn't really involved in, and it just didn't go well. And then they got left hanging with part of it.
That's how you know you're a successful person in Hollywood, when you can say, I think I'm an executive producer on that film. I'm not really sure.
I know I am on the second one. on the third one, I can't remember.
I'm actually looking out onto the set of I'm in Chicago, and my view is Navy Pier. So I'm basically on the set of Divergent right now.
Right.
Neil, I want you to be able to celebrate your actors for a bit, because one of the most fun things that I got to enjoy watching Voyagers is how they evolve their performances very, very subtly and very, very calculatedly, in how they have to go from like a situation where they know very little, and then as the truths are sort of removed from their eyes and the blinders are pulled back from their eyes, they can show more enthusiasm, they can show more instinctive type reactions to things. Can you talk a bit about the conversations that you had with them to almost maybe like, don't give as much early on, because later on we're going to need you to be at a certain point?
Yeah, I mean, it was even more than that, because it was, I had a group of really 30, 20-year-olds on set. That's who made up the crew. They were really supposed to be 18, but the people that were, the actors were, everywhere from like 17 to 22 or something like that. So I had 30 of them. And obviously there were 11 principals, leading with Tye Sheridan and Finn Whitehead and Lily Rose Depp and Shantae Adams. But so the trick there was like, what do you do with all that, that nervous, youthful energy? That was really one of the biggest challenges of just getting that out of them, and because the characters, as you point out, are supposed to be, they're sort of deadened and they're docile and they haven't experienced anything. And I sort of always use the example of, they're like horses that have never been let out of the stall. And if you take a horse that's never been let out of the stall and you bring it into an open meadow and just let it go, it just stands there. Yeah. And so that's it doesn't run, it just stands there. And if it's the same with these kids, these young people, that they just have never done anything. And so they are just, their inner metronome is clicking very slowly. So that was incredible. We actually did these sort of group meditation things where we were sort of sessions just to kind of like take it all down. And it was just a very big thing about talking to them about, if somebody speaks your name, you don't need to even necessarily turn your head. It's like there was no energy that needed to be expended to do anything except the bare minimum. Wow. But it was a trick. It was a challenge doing it, because they're all just, their knees are tapping and they're, just wanting to dance. And so, which was great for when they sort of burst free. But before it was interesting. And also, sorry, I'm just going on, but to keep them, to have them be dead and yet still get a glimmer of their personality. That was the trick. Not to have it be boring. So
I really picked up on that. I really did pick up on that.
Yeah, thank you.
To their credit.
Neil, I felt really smart after watching this movie, and that I made the connection to Lord of the Flies. And whenever someone makes a literary connection, I was like, oh yeah, because I read that in high school, and now I feel really smart. And then I brought it up. We spoke about it at the junket, and I felt really smart about making the comparison to you at the junket, only to then see everyone else's interviews and see that they also compared it to Lord of the Flies.
Right.
And so I guess just from your perspective, you're doing press all day and people are making the comparison to Lord of the Flies. And there are a lot of comparisons, but if you remember, Lord of the Flies are also, as you pointed out to me in the junket, a lot of differences as well. Is there a part of you, especially during the junket as a filmmaker, that's like, okay, calm down. I just wanted to make an entertaining movie. It's not necessarily a word for word adaptation of this British classic novel. It's also it's just a fun space movie as well.
Well, I mean, I like hopefully it is that it is a fun space movie that has that's intense and riveting and cinematic and a good ride. But I mean, I like those as a filmmaker. I'm interested in those ideas. I'm interested in those other aspects of it. So I like that people make that connection or draw that connection. So, I mean, I want to sometimes I feel like they're saying it kind of maybe in a dismissive way or something like that. Like, it's like, oh, well, you've just done this, all you've done is just remade Lord of the Flies in space. And, the intention was not to do that. But the intention was, I think I can't remember if I spoke to you about it, but, when I finished writing it, the first draft, or maybe even partway through, I realized, oh, this is like sort of evocative of Lord of the Flies. And I could have run away from that. I mean, I actually made the conscious, I was like, should I, bolt from that, so I don't, I'm not always being asked that question, or should I lean into it? I decided to lean into it in a way, because I thought it was an interesting influence and reference and comparison.
So I shouldn't feel as bad about bringing it up at the jump.
No, not at all.
I picked up on a lot of Garden of Eden references to it, of like biblical. Maybe it's just because it's Easter. I'm in the Easter mindset.
No, and that's right too, because they basically, in early draft, like I have like a whole, novels worth of stuff for the earlier, for the prologue, when and it sort of was called, informally among those people, like the God Project, in the sense that they were birthing these children or these humans and cultivating them and completely constructing their whole world, their existence. And so it is that of that, like, the kind of the connection to home is some sort of, that's like their God or something. They have this program, which is sort of, you could say like the Bible or something. And, so, yeah.
Neil, I find your history of filmmaking really interesting, because you started off in music video elements and commercials. I think I was reading Ridley Scott Associates. You were even doing like commercials. I don't know if that's
he has a commercial company, and I was a director under. Not under contract anybody, but I did commercials for them.
So that's what I wanted to ask you, like what you remember about your time doing that, and kind of how that applies now to the movies you're making today. And like, were you working directly with like Ridley Scott at that time, like when, or like the music video element of it as well? Because you look at a lot of very, very successful filmmakers like David Fincher and people who come from television or commercials or music video backgrounds, and what does that give you as a filmmaker, and do you have any memories of that time of your life?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, it made me a filmmaker in the sense that you're working, you're making these different things, and you're working under all these different circumstances. You're working, it depends on what you're doing, but I was doing, commercials that were like little scenes, but then you inevitably end up doing I'm doing car commercials. So it's like, that's like a skill. Or I'm in a helicopter shooting something, or I'm against green screen and we're using all this CGI. So it was an incredibly great film school. You have enough money to do it properly. You're also accountable for your work. Yet they want you to be an artist, which is, the people that are the advertising, within reason. But most importantly, I got to work with great people. I could hire, like Bob Richardson used to shoot commercials for me. Bob Richardson, he shot a whole handful of commercials.
Tarantino's guy now, and Paul Thomas Anderson's guy. Wow.
Yeah. And also like, Fred Elms, who used to shoot for David Lynch, and, who shot Blue Velvet, and there's other people, and I'm just blanking on who they are, but all the time. Fred Murphy, who shot The Dead for John Huston, so that was amazing, because as a young person, I'm in my late 20s or something like that, and I'm like, I think the camera should go here, and then it should go like this, and they're like, oh, I think that's a great idea. And you're like, you do? You're like so happy to like get that affirmation from these guys who are established, or they're like, that's a great idea, but why don't we go on a longer lens and kind of come this way? And you're like, oh, I get it, So wow. It was great. But with Ridley owned the company, and I met Ridley not very many times, and Tony was still alive then, and but they were great and very sort of nurturing. So, but
that's really cool.
Yeah, it was good.
Richardson, man, that's so wild to hear
Yeah.
that. Because do you think of like all the movies he shot? Wow, that's amazing.
Well, the other interesting thing is that Hank Corwin, I don't know if you know who Hank Corwin, he's an editor who edited The Big Short and and I think he won an Academy Award for either JFK or Natural Born Killers. Wow. He was my commercial editor.
Oh my God! Wow.
At the time,
awesome.
He was, and you could see like what, he couldn't quite fit into the film business in a normal way, but those movies are really, intense. Anyway, so it was great.
Building off of that a little bit too, just in the people that you've been able to work with over the years, and I want to sort of celebrate what Colin Farrell does for this part. You have outstanding character actors and people who have star qualities to them, but you've really taken them in different directions. Whether you go back to Bradley Cooper, what you were able to do with him with Limitless, and working with Giamatti and Edward Norton. What does someone like Colin Farrell bring to a production like this when you have so many young actors and he has such a body of work that you can lean on?
Well, I mean, those young actors are just in awe of him. And when he, for good reason, and when he comes on the set, he really brings he sort of centers things. I hope as a director, I do that to a degree, but at a certain point they get, they've been around me for 4 weeks and they're tired of me. They're starting to, take their advantage or whatever. But he comes in and he's like, and Colin is a very, very strong person, a very, sort of, what's the right word? Empathetic and caring person. He's just, the best actor. He's like kind of raw honesty, and just kind of wants to be, real and honest and deep, which sounds sort of silly, that deep part of it. But he just wants to take in life at its deepest level. But he is truly an empathetic person, which is why he's perfect in the role. And, and he's a strong person and a really interesting person and smart and, wants to talk and wants to engage and wants to kind of suck in life. And it's, it's powerful.
Just to follow up real quick, did Bradley shadow you a lot on Limitless? Were you surprised to see him graduate into directors?
I'm not, because he didn't, he wasn't shadowing, but he was like, why are you doing this? And why are you doing that? And what would you ever move the camera through this, through the doorway from the inside to the out, so always, as if you were moving through a wall. And I'd say, no, I wouldn't do that. And this is why. And so he was interested. I didn't think it was going to happen, I don't know, maybe so quickly and certainly so dramatically, but he definitely, and I'm really proud of him that he did it like that. But so he's really emerged as, with a real vision. It's great.
Yeah, it's incredible.
Neil, one of the really kind of interesting and also heartbreaking things of this movie is this idea of all of these kids doing a lot of work for something that they might not end up seeing. The idea that they're doing all this work and making these sacrifices for their grandchildren, and a lot of them could end up dying along the way in the journey. And I'm sort of kind of wondering, I sort of like to make a weird comparison to being a filmmaker and crafting a film and then sort of handing it off to the studio to do with it promote it how they want, or potentially maybe even edit it how they want. Or is there ever a degree of putting in a lot of work and then also kind of blindly let's just see what happens, because I might not even get to see the final product that I worked so hard for? Yeah,
I mean, it's interesting because I don't really worry about, I suppose they could have edited it the way they want. I never had that happen to me. And though some of the movies I've had Final Cut on, I don't think I technically had Final Cut, but it's sort of like you have Final Cut with consultation or something like that. So, but even so, you're right, they could. And in a way, things happen that, even on this movie, you're testing the movie and everybody's like, or, which sometimes it goes great. And other times it's a little difficult. And then you start making changes and then perhaps you regret them. So it's the same. The effect is the same as if somebody taking your movie, you might do it to yourself, but maybe you wouldn't have done it without, whatever the pressure is or something. But, yeah, I mean, look, and they could really bungle the marketing and stuff like that, and it could just open badly. And I think they have really good marketing on this one.
It doesn't give too much away. Have you ever seen a trailer or a TV spot for one of your films and thought that's not the movie I made? That doesn't even remotely represent the movie I made.
Well, I mean, you could say that. This is this is pretty extreme. You know what I mean? You've seen the trailer of this. You've seen the movie. They have a slightly different tempo to them. But I think it does represent the spirit of the movie. But no, I mean, in general, I've had pretty good luck, actually. I've had bad luck in the sense of like movies being delayed, but for whatever reason, like in this case, but it wasn't really bad luck. It might be for the best. We were supposed to come out at Thanksgiving, but it's interesting as far as that, like that idea of putting in the time or putting in, planting the seed for something that you're never going to see grow. It's like you plant a seed for a tree, you're going to be dead by the time it's worth sitting under or giving you shade. But, it's the same kind of thing. If you're like a 16-year-old or a 17-year-old in World War II, and it's like, what are you fighting for? You're not fighting for yourself. Maybe you are, but you're fighting, you die on the battlefield. And it's like, I mean, we're all like, the recipients of that sacrifice, and it's incredible. And it's like that that person might have died feeling they were doing the right thing, and that it was worth it to them to live their short life in that way. And so it's like, how does that work, and how do you ever sacrifice for somebody else, or should you? Or anyway, so it's all those ideas about the common good versus raw individuality.
This is not an elevator pitch movie. I'm sorry, Kevin. I didn't mean to.
You're gonna pitch me what?
No, this is not an elevator pitch movie in any way, shape, or form. It asks so many big questions, and that's what I admired so much about it. I'm sorry, Kevin.
Thank you. No. Yeah.
I was going to say, Neil, I have to imagine you've been asked this question before, but this is kind of a two-part question. The first part of it's going to be this. So The Illusionist turns 15 this year, which is, an incredible film. We all love that movie. But I want to know just the perspective of kind of like, because everyone knows that The Prestige also came out, I think, 2 months later. After. And I have to imagine you've been asked this before, but how does that happen? Just in Hollywood in general, where you have two films centered around magic. I mean, because they're different movies completely, but I just wonder, like, for you, from your perspective, how does that happen? Like, Armageddon and Deep Impact was another one I remember, like, where there two similar types of films came out around the same time. How does that go down in terms of Hollywood?
I think it happens because there's something in the air for the filmmakers who come up with those ideas, and then there's something that in the air for the people that are willing to finance it. So if you think that like I read, my story is based on a Stephen Milhauser story called Eisenheim the Illusionist, and I can't really remember when that book came out, but it might have come out like in the late 80s or something like that. Or it's a short story in a larger collection called In the Barnum Museum, and I'd have to look and see when that came out. But I read that and I always kind of liked it, and it was something that I always thought could be a movie. And after I did my first movie, it's interesting because Brian Koppelman, David Levine, who produced Interview with the Assassin, ended up producing The Illusionist as well. We were it was like in 2001, we were editing the Interview with the Assassin, and they were working, because they're writers. I don't know if you know who they are. Do you know who they are? They did like Knock Around Guys.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Anyway, so they were editing. Oh, they were being asked to write a Houdini movie. And they were like, how do we do this? Because with film, you can just always cut to cut away and then you come back to the box, and then she was cut in two and now she's whole again. It's like, who cares? And I was like, I know how to do that. I have a story that I can do that and better. So they were already working on something that had something to do with magic. And in 2001, and then the other thing is, I think that the Harry Potter movies, when was the first Harry Potter movie? 2001.
I think.
Yeah.
I think this year's the 20th anniversary.
And so by the time I got my story written, so Christopher Nolan, he was interested in that project for whatever reasons, interested in probably a lot of different projects, as was I. But somehow I think perhaps the money thinks that, like, well, it's not we weren't making Harry Potter, but somehow magic. There were a lot of other ones too. They were like, I think it's not called Carter Beats the Devil, because that sounds like something else. But there was a number of other things, and there's still ones coming out. Like the War Magician, I think, is now being made or has been made. And those were all percolating at that time.
Oh, wow.
So I don't know why really, but there was a number of things being, around even at the time where I thought like, oh, it wasn't the Prestige I was worrying about. It was something else, that was going to come out at the same time.
Did you ever have a conversation with Christopher Nolan about just both your movies? Have you guys ever talked about Prestige and Illusionist? I mean, again, different movies, but just in a 2-month period, it just blows my mind because it's just pretty wild that those two films came out within that time period. I've talked to
Hugh Jackman, but Christopher Nolan, I haven't. No, I've never met Christopher Nolan.
What did Jackman say anything specific about?
No, he was very nice. He was like, he thought it was funny and fun, and so. Yeah.
Cool.
I was annoyed, but not with Hugh Jackman. It was too bad. I felt it sort of clogged the conversation. But
we love the Illusionist. I love the Illusionist.
Thank
you.
Neil, we're going to end it on one last question, then we're going to let you go. We're now obviously it feels like turning a corner in terms of theatrical releases. Theaters here in Chicago were open. They're opening around the country. It seems like a lot of people were actually excited about the idea of going back to the movies again. I had my first press screening on Monday for the first time in a long time. And I'm sort of curious, in a theater, which was fantastic. This movie is going to be in theaters. But I'm sort of curious, is there ever grass is always greener? Like, this movie is going to be in theaters at a time where people are slowly percolating, going back out to the theaters. But is there any part of you that's like, well, damn, I kind of wish you were on VOD as well, or did you just always want it in theaters?
I mean, I always saw it as a theatrical movie, and so did Lionsgate, and that was one of the reasons that we went with them, and they've always felt like it was a theatrical movie. They had big ideas for it, in that last Thanksgiving, and they were sticking to them, and they could have just put it out on VOD, but I really appreciate that, because I feel like that theatrical experience is special. And even though people are, so stuck on their devices these days, and I get it, because so am I think that there's something, really human about that communal experience, about laughing together in a theater, or being just tense on your, gasping, or, so I kind of crave that, and I wish that the movie gets seen that way. And so I feel very lucky, and I'm glad that they're taking the gamble on it. So, at this time. So,
and Lionsgate's one of the few studios who's doing that, thankfully, because you have a lot of studios. Again, Warner Brothers was day and date, and then you have some studios are doing 17 days. You got to commend Lionsgate. It's really cool they're doing that.
Yeah. No, I do. It's great.
Yeah, good timing with more theaters opening up. Now we're able to do that. So, Neil, thank you so much for your time. We really appreciate you joining the show, and
thank you.
Continued success with the movie. We can't wait to send people to it.
Thanks so much. Great talking to you guys. Appreciate the questions.
All right, of course. Bye-bye. Thank you.
Bye.
Thanks, Neil.
Thank you so much to director Neil Berger for joining us on Real Blend this week. And of course, thank you to Lionsgate for helping facilitate that and set it up for us. If you want to check out Voyagers, this is a phrase that we haven't said a lot lately, but we're saying it more and more often these days. You can see it only in theaters. VOD, for now at least, is not an option. Kevin, going back to because I'm so glad you brought it up, because it's such an interesting concept. The two movies that are very similar opening up within a few months of each other. I know you're a big Illusionist fan. I think I've only seen it one time in theaters. I remember liking it, but I also remember sort of being very heavily in the Prestige camp that 100%. Year. Where do you fall? Are you still a Prestige guy? You just happen to like the Illusionist?
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, no question. If you go down to the basic argument of these of two similar films, I'm an Armageddon guy versus a Deep Impact guy. I'm a Prestige guy versus an Illusionist guy. I guess I don't even remember Volcano and Dante's Peak as well enough to.
Volcano was Tommy Lee Jones. Dante's Peak was Pierce Brosnan.
Well, I remember the movie. I just don't remember I don't remember anything about them.
I've only seen Dante's Peak. I think once, and it was on TV. Yeah. I've seen Volcano. I probably watched that movie 100 times when I was a kid.
I remember. I cannot remember. I would say I remember the trailer because it was on a VH. I think it was on the VHS for Independence Day, and I had the VHS, so I played that on a loop, and it was a really cool teaser trailer.
Was it a Bruckheimer movie? I mean,
it feels, especially if it was an action movie in the 90s, there's an 85% chance it was a Bruckheimer movie.
Dante's Peak sounds more Bruckheimer-y, the title. I don't know why, but it's so weird because the other day I watch a lot of physical discs. So when I throw the discs in, they still have trailers from the time the disc came out.
Cool.
So I actually, one of my favorite things nowadays, speaking of what you were saying about Independence Day, is I let those trailers play at home. Even the movies that are 5, 6, 7 years old, if the disc is 5, 6, 7 years old. And like, honestly, like Lauren and I were in the kitchen the other day, and some of these old trailers were coming on for like films, older films. I'm like, man, that looks really good. Then all of a sudden the title pops up. I'm like, oh, I've already seen that movie.
I've seen that. Well,
like,
it's also a cool
kinda,
time capsule to kind of let you know like what people were anticipating within 6 months of that movie that you're watching at the time. So that's very cool.
I don't know. I kind of liked revisiting that feeling of a trailer and not knowing what it was. But yeah, no, I think at the end of the day, I'm probably more of a Prestige guy. Because it's Nolan, but also I think Prestige had, I don't know, The Illusionist was pretty mind-blowing too, though. They're both very good movies. I need to go back and see The Illusionist again. It's been a few years.
That conversation did make me want to check it out. All right, so talking points. A lot of things to talk about this week. I want to start out talking about the SAG Awards. And before we get into the winners and the losers, and more importantly, its impact on the Oscars, I want to talk to you guys about this whole, because they were the only ones that attempted to do pre-recorded, 100% Zoom, 1 hour show, a tight 1 hour show. Gabe, I'm going to start with you. This made me excited about the fact that the Oscars have seemed to have figured it out, at least a way to do mostly in person, still live, because I don't know about you, but to me that pre-recorded 1 hour show was just it was a snooze fest, man.
I don't like the pre-recorded Zoom stuff. Is kind of hard to watch. I say on a show recorded by Zoom. No, but did you see? I think it was today. I saw that the Oscars actually, people attending the Oscars and working the Oscars were going to get essential worker waivers.
Saw that.
For that. So that's kind of a big deal, and it seems like they're actually going to be able to pull it off.
Yeah,
I agree. I'm much. In the same way where like Godzilla versus Kong is sort of halfway this bellwether for a return. We don't want to go too fast. We don't want to get ahead of ourselves, certainly. It feels like the Oscars might be able to be that for that side of the industry, or for that sort of that moment that we have every year. If it feels like the Oscars at the end of this month, I think that's just, as a movie fan and as an Oscars fan, that's going to feel so good after, unfortunately, what we've had so far with these socially distanced ones.
And Kevin, don't you sort of aren't you kind of excited about like the prospect of the Oscars have been put in a position where they kind of have to shake things up a little bit. They're not at the Dolby Theater this year. They're in a completely different venue. I think the show's really going to look different. I think it's going to feel different. While this is likely going to be, and we've discussed this, probably the lowest rated Oscars ever, this is the most I've been excited about the actual show itself in a long time, because I feel like going into it, I don't know what it's going to look like, and I don't know what it's going to feel like. And I don't know. How are you feeling about the actual show itself, aside from the nominees?
I think I will say this. I mean, I think this award season's been strange. I think the most excited I've been to see an Oscars show was the show with no host. Was that last year or 2 years ago, whatever the year that was.
I think that was last year.
It was definitely last year.
Yeah, and the reason I mentioned that is because I was excited to see how the show, like you just said, how the show was going to play out and kind of how it was going to be. I don't know.
But we missed a host. Didn't we all come out of that going, we miss a host?
I did. No, I actually kind of like the way it moved. I also don't think the Oscars need to be 3 hours, though, which is a whole nother...
Fine. Yeah, that's
whole nother realm. I mean, if you want to bring a host in and make it 2 hours or, whatever. Listen, I'm interested in this award season. I get more interested as we get more winners that go against what we thought was going to win. So, like, obviously with SAG, with Viola Davis winning, now I'm interested in the actress category. It's not one and done. We don't know for sure. I think we all can agree Chadwick's going to win for actor completely. I think he deserves it 100%. So that category I'm good with. But right now, with picture, trial winning SAG ensemble. That could be, that seems like a safe bet for a movie that could win Best Picture, with Nomadland kind of being the front runner, I believe, still. The show itself, though, I mean, with the pre-record, it's never as energetic. It's not as fresh. It feels like you're watching something that was already done, because you are watching something that was already done. So I think with the Oscars, I'm excited to see how they do it. I think they'll put on a big show. Like you said, Jake, I think we're kind of going more towards quote unquote normalcy with the box office numbers and kind of getting back into things with the vaccines and everything like that. So that really is where I would be more interested in watching the show, as to where we are now. And I think at the end of the day, mentally, if we see some type of normalcy in a show like that, I think it's just gonna be good for people generally, mentally speaking. Because, you know, we're watching, when you see these Zoom interviews, and, you know, I don't know if you guys watched Daniel Kaluuya host SNL over the weekend. I thought it was probably one of the best SNL shows I've seen in a while. I just thought he was a great host. And he was funny. He looked into the camera during his monologue and said, I used to watch Keenan and Kel, and to be here is pretty amazing. But he showed his Golden Globes clip where they went to him as the winner, and then his mic was cut off, and then Laura Dern goes on camera and they go back to him. And like, it was just a reminder of, you know, where we are right now. And not that we're not getting reminders every day in the news with more serious situations, clearly. But I think if we see the Oscars in some type of quote unquote normal way, I think mentally it's just good for people to see things like that.
Well, I want to ask you guys about really quickly just about the what SAG did for the Oscar race moving forward. To your point, Kevin, you touched on the fact that I think it solidified a lot of races. I think Chadwick Boseman, Best Actor. I think Daniel Kaluuya, Best Supporting Actor. But it also made a lot of races very complicated and very difficult to predict. Most notably, I think, actress and supporting actors. Viola Davis kind of getting her first major win late in the awards season makes Best Actress kind of seem up in the air, because you could make the argument that, honestly, of the 5, 4 of them have a shot. I would say Vanessa Kirby's kind of on the outlier, where she really hasn't won anything up to this point. But you got Carey Mulligan having won Critics' Choice. You've got Frances having won something, I want to say.
She won the Globe?
Andrew Day won the Globe.
Oh, that's right.
Did Frances win like a
I want to say Frances. Yeah. Well, BAFTA hasn't happened yet, so I think BAFTA's coming up. But then you've got Viola Davis winning SAG. So where do you guys stand on who, if there is a front runner in the Best Actress category, who do you guys think it is?
I think that's
now.
I think the only thing that we know is, I think Chadwick is a lock. Mm-hmm. That's just is what it is. I think the Kaluuya win makes him a front. Does that make him a front?
Yeah, I mean, he hasn't lost yet.
He's won a lot.
Yeah. The only argument you could make is that he's going against Lakeith at the Oscars, which he hasn't had to do. But I don't think Lakeith has enough support behind him, because the universal, in my opinion, the universal opinion is that's Kaluuya's movie.
But Lakeith is also, I like that film a lot. His performance isn't as strong as Kaluuya's.
Agreed. Yeah, I can't imagine anyone saying, well, I'm going to give it to Lakeith over Daniel.
No, and Lakeith's great. A great actor. I think he's phenomenal. But Kaluuya, to me, as I look back on that film from an energy standpoint, just the way he commands the screen and the presence in the screen. But it's interesting with the actress category, there's really no... I would be interested to know who Gold Derby says is the front runner, because basically it's like, okay, so you got Andra Day, Globe, then you got Viola Davis, SAG Award, right? And then who else are we thinking about here? See, I'm genuinely hopeful that Carey Mulligan will still swing in and win. That's who I really want to see win.
Let's see. Let's go to.
What does Gold Derby say?
Gold Derby. Listen, I'm going to predictions right now.
Wonder who their front runner is. I'm gonna say it's probably. Maybe I bet you Viola Davis has become number 1 on their list because
I think
of the
that's
SAG
win. It's a big boon, yeah, for sure.
Because remember, for people who are listening, we all know this, but the acting category of the Oscars is the biggest voting category, the most number of people voting, and actors vote for SAG Awards. So it's always interesting. That math seems to make sense when you think about it. Okay, all right, so if that actress won a SAG Award, that would mean she's probably going to get all the same votes she got for the Oscars. And it doesn't really ever turn out to be that way sometimes, unless there's a clear frontrunner throughout the whole Oscar season.
So Gold Derby still has Carey Mulligan in first place at 7-2 odds, but not too far behind with 4-1 odds is Viola Davis, who has definitely jumped up in the race. Andrew Day also in third place, but with 4-1 odds, and then Frances in fourth place, and then Vanessa Kirby in fifth. But in terms of the SAG changing Gold Derby's prediction, the actress from Minari is now in first place in their predictions for Best Supporting Actress, and because that was a shocking win with Maria Bakalova falling to second place because it seems to be between those two.
I will say I love Minari a lot. Gabe, sorry. I love Minari a lot, and I think that performance to me. And listen, I think Bakalova, in my opinion, deserves the Academy Award. I would give it to her in a heartbeat. I just don't think we're ready to give the Oscars, quote unquote, are ready to give a comedy performance like that a win. I mean, you'll nominate Melissa McCarthy for Bridesmaids. You're not going to give it to her, though. And I genuinely believe that they can't, it's just my personal opinion, they can't see past the absurdity of a movie like Borat. They'll nominate her. She had a stellar performance. I think she deserves to win out of that group, no question. Now, if we're speaking realistically here, the performance in Minari, and I don't want to mess up her name, so I'm not going to try. But she's amazing in Minari. She plays the grandmother. The entire relationship between the grandmother and the grandson is, in my opinion, the best part of that film. Every performance in that movie is amazing. But I think that the actress who plays the grandmother, who's been acting for decades, by the way,
I'll give it a try just to give her credit. I believe it's Yun Yu Jung. I could be incorrect.
Yun Yu Jung. I would rather have it pronounced correctly than pronounce it wrong. So thank you.
Okay,
let
me ask you guys: is there a part of you that's a little surprised, considering how often we talk about how much the Academy loves giving career Oscars? That Glenn Close isn't more of a part of the conversation. Like the fact that she was so
kind of a joke.
She wasn't good though.
Yeah, but how often do people win for movies that aren't good?
Didn't she get nominated for a Razzie? Right?
She got nominated for a Razzie and for an Oscar for the same film.
But how many?
Oh, okay. Here's what I'll say. Hillbilly Elegy is not a good film.
Who was nominated for a Razzie?
It's happened before. It's been a while. Here's my little defense of that. Hillbilly Elegy isn't, in my opinion, is not a good film. It's
not that bad.
But it's not that bad. But Glenn Close is very good in it.
Yes.
No one can knock her performance, which is why I think the whole Razzie thing's a little ridiculous, because I would challenge the Razzie voters that they're voting on the movie, not on Glenn Close's performance. You cannot look at that performance and tell me that performance is bad.
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, I listen. I do think Hillbilly Elegy was given a worse rap than it was. It wasn't great. Ron Howard, Amy Adams, Glenn Close. You would expect a masterpiece or level of that from that filmmaker.
I think it's just because it so clearly had Oscar aspirations. If it had just been a casual movie that had come out in March, I don't think people would have ragged on it as much. But it was primed to be a premier Oscar contender.
I do think Glenn Close is very good in that movie, but I don't think she's gonna win because the movie I don't think was well received enough. I believe that the Minari actress,
which is not something I feel like we would have said 5 days ago. All right, we're gonna move on to something that I really did not expect us to be talking about today, but a new Ghostbusters clip has been released. And
brought to you by Baskin Robbins.
Yeah, a lot of elements there worthy of talking about that I was not expecting. The biggest of which is what everyone says it's a bunch of little tiny Stay Puffed Marshmallow Men. Of course, a throwback to the original film. I texted you guys this earlier. My complaint is that it felt like there was a focus group. And there was a group of people sitting around a board table at Sony, basically saying, "Okay, here are all the things that focus groups love. Here are what people love." Yeah. And basically, I feel like someone raised their hand and said, "We need something tiny and cute. We need the Ghostbusters equivalent of a Baby Yoda." And that's to me what this clip felt like, is a focus group saying, "We want something tiny and cute that we can make toys out of," which is why it didn't.
It is cute.
I don't know how cute it was to watch them burning themselves.
That's funny.
Apparently, I could not see it, but apparently there's a Terminator 2 reference in there. Apparently, one of them holds his little thumb up.
That's great. I thought it was fun.
It was fun. It didn't bother. I didn't dislike it. It just felt like, oh, this is you guys trying to do Baby Yoda.
Here's my. Are you gonna reference Ant-Man in your defense?
No, well,
Okay.
I was going to bring it up at some point,
Okay,
where I
okay,
think
okay.
the Baskin-Robbins things is now a joke with Paul Rudd specifically. Because didn't he do a Baskin-Robbins things in another movie?
Okay,
I saw-
if it happens a
Ant-Man.
third time, then
Ant-Man.
it becomes a joke. But
It's
the
the third
second time just wait. What is the third time?
I saw someone say that it was the third.
Well,
Because I don't know what the
Ant-Man-
second reference was. Yes,
In Ant-Man, he gets out of prison, right?
He
And
works
he
at a
works at
Baskin-Robbins.
Baskin-Robbins, gets fired for being there. Now, that makes sense. That product placement makes sense.
Hang on. Well, hang on. Before we get there, what I was going to say is we are discussing this like this is a scene from the movie where Paul Rudd's character hops off the adventure and goes to get some Baskin-Robbins at the grocery store, and this is what it looks like.
Right.
I'm not certain that this is a clip from the movie, and they call it a character reveal and not just a literal ad that they got a Baskin-Robbins sponsorship to pay for the production of.
You would have to say that in the tweet, though. You'd have to say if it was an ad, I believe.
What the?
Well, no, an ad for the movie, not a Baskin-Robbins
Oh.
ad. Like they call it a character reveal. I think it's just a bit that they put
So
together.
you don't
to
think this
show
is actually
you-
going to be a part of the movie?
There's it. I don't know how they could put the context of that to make it feel right. I didn't have enough time because it came up right before we started recording. I wanted to do a side by side of him in the trailer and him in that video, and I'm pretty sure he doesn't have any gray in his beard. Like I think they just
like
I
that
think
could
they
have just been a
recorded
newly
this-
filmed. Okay,
I think it's a newly filmed. Yes, it's done with a focus group, but I think it's just an ad for the movie
Yeah.
to reveal the character. I don't think it's a clip from the movie. It didn't feel. It had score,
Yeah.
but it just looked like a commercial. It didn't feel like a
just-
movie clip. If it is, that's gonna be weird. But
I
we
don't
have
mean
the
to be
context of it.
persnickety, but I'm sorry. When you show up to a grocery store and you're looking through the glass, it is not all Baskin Robbins in one exact section. The way to me, and again, I'm not trying to
Right.
be that guy.
But I think it's
but it
shot
was-
like a commercial. Is my point.
Glaringly.
But I think it's shot like a commercial. If you saw that in a movie, yes. But I think it's shot like a commercial. When you watch a commercial for
Yeah.
X, all their
That's fair.
products fill every shelf, and you're like, oh, okay, this is just I'm watching a commercial for such and such. I'm not saying it's an ad for Baskin Robbins. In my head, this is my theory. This will probably be figured out by the time we post this. When I saw this, what I figured happened is this is a clip that they made to promote this little character. They reached out to Baskin Robbins. Maybe they really did make it a joke with Paul Rudd because this is a third Baskin Robbins reference. And they said, hey, give us money to feature Baskin Robbins and we can pay for this ad. Like that to me, that's all it was. And I was
or shouldn't they get money from like Stay Puft?
maybe, I guess. Is that a real brand?
I don't. I always assumed it wasn't.
Wait,
Hey,
I
okay,
thought it
if
was just
Stay
made up.
Puft is not a real, because I don't.
No,
I'm not a
it
big,
can't be, right?
Is it
Who
not?
owns brand?
Is it?
Yeah, I think that's... Who would pay for like, hey, yeah, have our product become giant and destroy a
Honestly,
city?
I'm gonna. Up until this moment in my life, honestly assumed
I don't
Stay
think
Puft
so.
was an actual. And also, I gotta be honest. Of all the times I've ever like bought
like
marshmallows,
Jiffy Pop and Scream?
I don't think I've ever like thought about what brand of marshmallows I'm getting because I
have
don't
no idea.
buy them that
Yeah.
often.
Yes.
But I honestly like this is genuine, actual, life altering news for me. If Stay Puft is not an actual marshmallow brand,
I'll look it up. Continue your thoughts.
I don't think it is. I had a problem with them burning themselves. Like that was I don't
was
know
fun.
what
I like
watched
marshmallows.
I watched it with Lauren. I didn't know because they're cute and they had
Yeah, did you watch
facial
Sausage Party?
expressions. But this is not Sausage Party. Sausage Party is an R-rated movie about sex with food products. Like this
But
is
it's
a
supposed to be
Ghostbusters movie.
It's supposed to be horror adjacent.
Yeah, they're like kind
It's
of
a
like
ghost-
Gremlins. Kind of like Gremlins.
yeah.
Nothing in the first Ghostbusters dove around that path. Tell me something around
So you're talking about like the size of the Stay Puft Marshmallow Man changes your thoughts because
Not
you would have a problem with like bad things happening to giant.
I think it's
Stay
taken
Puft
way too
Marshmallow Man.
seriously.
No, I'm not trying to take it seriously. I'm trying to let you know emotionally how I felt when I watched it. Ghostbusters is one of my favorite movies of all time. When they're fighting the Stay Puft Marshmallow in the first Ghostbusters, that thing is like the size of the Empire State Building. It's like
Right.
crushing cars.
And his
killing
facial
people.
expressions are angry as opposed to the
Angry.
ones in this are cute and cuddly and they got little
Right.
high pitched squeals and.
I thought that was fun.
But it didn't seem like it didn't seem like they were in pain
No,
when
it
they
was a
were
joke. They were
burning
toasting
because they're marshmallows.
marshmallows.
Yeah, like it didn't seem
yeah.
like I feel like you're I appreciate your sympathy for the tiny little marshmallow men, but it didn't seem like it was hurting them.
No, yeah,
I felt like
don't
I was watching. Oh no, I'm not saying they were screaming for their lives. I just felt really awkward watching them be roasted.
I think it's great. I love that tone. I personally love that tone. I'm all in on that.
I'm
Jake.
more with that joke, with that particular joke. My concern is more of is that like just like like it's a cute little ghost, like is that gonna be the thing for the next 10 years where like every franchise has to have a cute little something that we all go over?
Yes.
Yeah.
But merchandising has always been a thing.
But as consumers,
They had what's his name? The green one.
Yeah, slime.
Yeah, but-
yes. But he wasn't cute and
Slime.
cuddly.
No, but he was the merchandise. They need a new merchant. Like that's always been. They're covering. They're trying to make as much money as possible. It's
Like
if you wanna watch commercial
what
movies,
is
that's
the
what it
toy
is.
gonna be? I guess I don't. Yeah, I guess.
Yeah,
All right,
that's
all right.
always going to be a question.
All right, let's move
Real
on.
quick,
Because yes,
before we move on, Stay Puft Marshmallow Man is a fictional brand.
my mind is blown. My
Yeah.
mind is blown. I feel stupid because I feel like people are going to come out of this show and be like, Jake, how the hell did you not know that? I'm sorry. I assumed that was a real brand of marshmallows.
Yeah,
Honestly,
and
if you would ask
it's-
me, like, name one brand of marshmallow, the only one I
Stay
can tell
Puft.
you is Stay Puft. I honestly, I feel so stupid, and I
That's
apologize.
probably the one I would think about first, but I don't think I knew. I
But,
don't
like,
think.
what's
I don't think. Yeah, I don't think I knew. I don't think I thought it was real. But I also.
My life is a lie.
It also wouldn't have surprised me if it was real. But I mean, that would have been pretty insane product placement if Stay Puft like actually had a character named after it like
missed
that.
opportunity.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
Apparently,
All
it's a mixture of the Pillsbury Doughboy and the Michelin Tire Man, which totally makes sense.
I guess because also you have to keep in mind,
When I was a kid, I thought it was
Yeah.
the Michelin
like
Tire Man.
what I'm young
It
enough
does-
so
it did
that
look
as
like
I
the
was
Michelin.
Yeah.
like when I was growing up, like Ghostbusters was already a thing.
Yes.
So I grew up I think I knew the concept of the like Stay Puft Marshmallow Man before I even knew like the Ghostbusters. Like I just knew that image.
Yes.
So I guess I just never took a moment
Again,
to think about.
he was probably a toy.
Yeah.
Probably a toy you played with.
Yeah. All
You
right.
also have to remember the Stay Puft Marshmallow, the tall one from the first one, was killing people. Like it was
Yes.
like it was stepping on cars.
Yeah, but it's
and,
like
destroying
Kong in that like
buildings.
it's not his fault. Like, was he too big or was the world around him just too small?
No, wasn't
Stay
it
Puft
like
seemed
pretty?
angry.
Yeah, he seemed very angry.
Well, I'd be angry too if little people were shooting things at me. All right.
Yeah, but his face was like evil. Like it
Yeah,
was like
it was just creepy.
evil Stay Puft. Like
know-
that kind of like creeped me out. You know what's even scarier was the painting in 2. Remember the painting? in
Yeah.
Oh,
2
the painting
comes
is
to
terrifying.
life?
That painting is terrifying.
That was so
super creepy.
scary.
Yeah.
That
Yeah.
scared me. I love Ghostbusters too. I don't care what anyone says, but I love that movie.
All right, we're going to move on because we have a lot to discuss with Godzilla vs. Kong because it was released over this past weekend, both in theaters and on HBO Max. Before we get to our thoughts on the film, I want to hear what you guys think about, there's a lot of debate about what was going to come from this Warner Brothers HBO Max move of them releasing day and date their movies both on HBO Max and in theaters. And does this mark the end of theaters as we know it? I feel like $48.5 million here domestically, over $250 million worldwide. To me, that says if people want to see a movie badly enough, even if they have it in their home, they will venture out to the theaters to see it. Does this make you guys feel better about the whole marriage of streaming and theaters?
100%.
You think so?
Oh, no question.
I don't know. I think there's too many there's too many variables. I think, for one, people are urgent to get back to the theaters. I think once we're like, whether that's
So is this an
gradual-
anomaly?
Well, here's the thing. I think that there's too many variables for us to have a clear takeaway. One, I think it's a great feeling. I think it's exciting news for all of us who have been worried about this. That's really encouraging. I think overall this year and through the summer, as more and more theaters open up, as more and more seats become available, I think people just want to do anything. I think the people who go and see 3 movies a year still really miss having not been able to see 3 movies in the last year, and are probably going to go see 2 movies within, the first month that they can. And so the numbers are going to be, I think we're going to see it maybe go up and then kind of even back out as people are just a little bit more urgent. The second variable that I think is interesting is you mentioned the whole HBO Max versus theatrical and day and date, and is that a good idea or a bad idea? Which is maybe not a discussion worth completely having because they've said next year they're going to have a larger window.
They're going back, yeah.
But I would be pressed to see what HBO or what Warner Brothers numbers look like in the late summer when there are movies that are purely theatrical competing with Warner Brothers movies that are coming out on both, because then you're going to see like, oh yeah, okay, 48.5 million sounds great right now with no reference compared to
no competition.
No competition, and compared to the pandemic thus far. But if we get to Top Gun, I don't know what movie Warner Brothers has coming out around Top Gun, but let's say we get to Top Gun and Top Gun has a full wide release and everything's great and good. And that does X amount of dollars. Yeah. But then you look at Warner Brothers and they go,
I think they have The Conjuring 3 around that time.
Yeah, and say they're consistently underperforming every other blockbuster by, 25%, then we can start to say like, well, see, 25% of their audience is arguably staying at home and just watching on HBO Max. So maybe it's not, as wonderful as we think it is now. I think there's too many variables for us to decide that. And it'll be a true test of what that's doing when there's competition and when it's more of a normal thing again.
So I think it's more clear cut than that. I think those numbers, in my opinion, were everything that we needed to know where our business is headed. I think from what I understand, and I could be wrong on this, look at the total of how much Godzilla King of Monsters made, and I believe this movie is about to pass that. And this is only a week or two in.
What are you talking about worldwide?
I believe so.
Well, domestically, King of Monsters made about $47 million, and Godzilla vs. Kong made 49 in the first 5 days, but it's the first 5 days in the middle of a pandemic, which is incredibly impressive.
Yeah.
Right.
But also, Godzilla vs. Kong got infinitely better reviews than King of Monsters was pretty savagely ripped apart, if I remember right.
True, but Suicide Squad also made almost $1 billion. That movie was ripped apart. I mean, like, sometimes it's really based on really kind of the want to see it. I think... So if you go back and look at the pandemic specifically, Wonder Woman, I think it did, 16 million in its first 3 days in theaters while also being on HBO Max. Tom and Jerry did 14 or so million first 3 days while also being on HBO Max. I think there's something to be said about the fact that people went to a theater to see it in that large amount of numbers. And like the fact that movie was available in your home, not even an extra subscription, you just get the HBO Max subscription. You don't pay the $30 premium that Disney is going to offer you for Black Widow. But I think at the end of the day, it seems pretty clear cut to me. It seems like that people decided in that moment that they would rather be seeing it in the theater. Now, going to the competition part of it, yes, that's very interesting. Now, Godzilla vs. Kong, though, I think it's such a brand that it's hard to like really look at it like that, because it's such a brand already that it already has amount of fans. Like,
I would argue against that, because yes, it's a very recognizable brand, but I also think it's a brand that with each movie still has to convince people to go out, because for every person that we know, I mean, think about your newsroom, Kevin. I had a lot of people in my newsroom that were like, "Oh my God, yeah, King Kong, Godzilla and King Kong," and then I also had a lot of people in my newsroom go, "Oh God, that sounds so stupid." So to me, it's not as built in as maybe like a Star Wars or a Marvel movie.
But like, okay, let's theoretically look at Black Widow. Let's think about it for a second. July, whatever 9th that movie comes out.
Yeah.
Right. All right. So
I think 9th is right.
Right. July 9th, the movie comes out. You have to pay for your Disney Plus subscription plus a $30 extra fee for Premiere Access. Will we see this large of a number and showing for Black Widow? Now, Black Widow is an interesting movie because it's not Avengers, not Endgame, it's not Infinity War. It's a spin-off character. Or, Black Widow is obviously a huge character of the Avengers, but it's a prequel. Character died in Endgame. I wonder if that film will give us an actual view of what a Marvel movie could do during this time. Because is Black Widow a large enough Marvel film? Is it on the scale of the Infinity War and the Endgame? I don't.
Maybe
think
I'm
so.
being optimistic, but I think the reason it pushed to July is because I think by July we're largely going to have a normal summer summer release schedule.
I agree with that as well.
Maybe that's optimistic.
Doesn't it just before
it seems like that's the goal.
But people will still have the option to watch Black Widow at home.
Yeah, Black Widow is an interesting example because it is a 4-quadrant family movie at the end of the day. There's massive Marvel fans, there's massive action movie fans, and there's all these different people get together to watch it. And I think that one thing that we learned over the pandemic is that parents really love just paying $30 and giving kids something to look at over and over again. And they love that they don't have to leave their house to do that.
And you own it after that, right? It stays in your system after that, right? It stays on Disney Plus after you buy it. Like that's what happened with Mulan.
Yeah, so that's an interesting example where we might see a really firm sort of divide between like not as many kids. I don't know that we would know this, but it's like not as many. They didn't sell as many children's tickets to Black Widow because it was available at home. But I think by then the people who want to go see a big Black Widow movie are going to go see it in theaters.
But I mean, but Gabe, like going back to what we were saying, I just feel like it seems so clear cut to me. Like doesn't the $48.5 or whatever
it's a
million
great number.
dollars, but like doesn't that like at the end of the day, what does that tell you? I mean, like at the end of the day, the movie was available in your home. People went out to see it.
Yeah.
Doesn't
but again,
that give
it's
you
not
a
the
little
same
promise?
It's not the same circumstance.
What
Is
do you
my
mean?
point. That by the late summer and the fall, if everything goes according to plan, let's say we're back
choices.
to normal. People will have the choice. They'll have a choice to do a million things. By the
So
fall
you're
or winter,
you're equating it to like people starving. Like if you
I think-
withhold food
I
from
think people
someone
are
and then they
hungry for a
scarf
movie.
down a burger, that might not be what they do if they had breakfast that day. But because they haven't eaten in a week, they're going to eat a lot more than they normally would.
Yeah, and I'm not
totally
saying
see
that. Yeah, I think that's part. That's why I say like I think it's hard to come with like a. This is
But doesn't
exactly
it just
what's gonna
feel
happen.
before we get
But it's
into sort of our
positive.
thoughts, like
good.
regardless, yeah, that's
It
what I was
does
gonna say.
feel great.
Regardless of how I feel about this movie, it made me unbelievably happy to see those box office numbers. Because think about where we were a year ago today. Some of the movies we were most looking forward to were slowly starting to be pushed back. At this point, I think we were starting to question if we were going to have a summer movie season.
Yeah.
And it was sort of this weird kind of darkness that felt like was slowly creeping over us. And now it's starting to feel like the darkness is receding. And that we're kind of like granted, yeah, this might be an anomaly in and of itself, but an anomaly is still a good sign that like we're moving in that direction a little bit.
It's 100% a good sign, and I think I mentioned this on our last show a couple weeks ago. But if you look at what the people who invest money in the industry are doing, they are investing money in theaters. Like you look at Alamo Drafthouse opening up new locations, and that's a great sign of where people whose job are to make a bet and do the research to make the bet. They're putting their money down, and they think that theaters are going to come back in a big way. And I think that this is a sure sign of that. I just mean that as far as the day and date, is that a great idea? Can we still have theaters have this massive success? Are people where does the audience lie? Right. I think we can't figure that out from this one.
Well, we have Matrix in December, so Matrix 4 will be a really cool indicator of like if Godzilla was sort of the first big example of this working.
Yeah.
Let's see what the last big example
Dune is
says.
still December, right?
I think Dune's October and Matrix is December.
Oh, okay.
All right.
I mean, definitively, I only see it as a good sign.
Anytime a movie does well is good for all of us. All right,
Absolutely.
I do want to touch on a wide range of emotions and experiences that we all had watching this movie. Kevin and I saw it very early, near the end of February, to check it out in advance of the junket. And we both watched it at home within about, correct me if I'm wrong, Kevin, 30 minutes of each other. I think you started it before I did, and we were kind of touching base back and forth. I think safe to say that neither of us were really big fans of it, and I was really shocked to see how positive the reviews were as they were coming out. Since then, we've both given it a second shot. Gabe, you didn't need a second shot because you loved it through and through, like a majority of people did. You loved it through and through the first time.
And didn't Sean O'Connell say it was better than Inglourious Bastards?
I do believe I could pull a quote from our text thread where Sean O'Connell said it was better than Inglourious Bastards.
I think he was memeing us.
But he's not here to defend himself, so it doesn't really matter.
Yeah. Inglourious Bastards has its flaws, but
No,
you have
it
your
doesn't.
flaws, Gabe.
no, you would agree that the Michael Myers bit is distracting.
It is.
That's kind of what I meant.
Yeah, but
kinda
that's like saying that beautiful person over there has like a little beauty mole. Like it's just a thing. It's just Mike Myers is the beauty mole.
part of its personality.
Inglourious Bastards.
The Mike Myers distraction in Bastards is, I would equate it to...
Or as Mike Myers would say, guacamole. That's what he says in Lost Rounds too.
I would equate it to Tarantino showing up in Django.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, it's
Like okay, all right, yeah. All right, but Gabe, you loved it.
Love is a strong word.
Well,
it has its issues.
I can pull your
It's
quotes.
awesome.
Oh, it is awesome. It was so much fun. I got to go see it in a theater, and it was so there's that excitement to it. To get to see a big movie like this on a big screen.
Right.
But so the thing that happened of why I say I think it was badass. One, Kong is badass in the movie. Kong is both of them are great, but Kong was so cool to see in this movie.
Best part of the movie.
Such a great like action star role for that guy. But something that happened, the human characters, the human element of this movie is still the flaw. It's not much better than the one before this, I would say. And there are moments watching where I'm like, oh, eye roll and looking away, and I'm like, this is really like. There's one moment where Brian Tyree Henry's character is like, I got this, and he pulls out a flash drive, and they're fascinated by the flash drive, and like Millie Bobby Brown grabs it, and she's like inspecting the flash drive, and it's like, guys, that's a flash drive. What he has on it is what's interesting. Why are we? There's some really bad moments like that,
and to the point where I have to ask, because I hate whenever people make the argument.
Let me finish that thought. Let me finish that thought real quick. What happened and why I left going, fuck it, that was badass, and I'm all in, was after the third act, after much of the movie, but after the third act and the way that it ends, and we always talk about, I think we've had filmmakers talk about it, and we discuss like those important moments of the beginning of the movie and where it leaves you are really important for how like an audience is gonna feel about the movie overall when it's done.
Like Rogue One, for example, is a great example of that, where it leaves you on that high note with Vader.
The high note that this movie leaves you on is so fucking high that when I was like driving home and I was trying to think like, what were those moments that I didn't like? It took me a long time to try to recall what was wrong with it. And I was like, hey, if the movie can get so good in this one aspect, in this really fun action movie aspect, that like my brain just dismisses the bad, then like, okay, well then yeah, that's all it needed to do. That's all it needed. Those could be better. I'm not saying this is a masterpiece. As far as action movies go, I think it's so much fun. And Wingard did an amazing job of sort of humanizing, these animals and giving like having so much stake in King Kong. I didn't realize how much after seeing, however many iterations of King Kong, whether that was the baggage I brought into this, and the way he kind of builds the relationship with King Kong and the human characters in the movie. I was rooting for the guy. Like it was really fun. It was really fun.
I mean,
Kevin, you've rewatched it. Yeah. We both rewatched it because I don't know about you, but like whenever I dislike a movie and it's universally loved, it does make me want to rewatch it because I get sort of this thought of like, wait, what was I in a weird headspace? Was I like, so I always want to try to go back and just have what are other people seeing? And sometimes that helps me. And sometimes I just double down in terms of how I felt. Here, I doubled down. How did you feel in your rewatch?
See, I went the opposite way. So I didn't like the film at all when I first saw it. And I still cannot get over the human characters. And here's the thing, and I think, Jake, you were about to say this point earlier. We're not sitting here trying to be those guys who are like, oh my God, an action movie has to have the best script ever, the best action, the best human characters and dialogue. I'm not looking for that. But I do think that when you're spending this amount of money on a film that has incredibly cool action scenes, and then we cut away to the garbage that we cut away to, and I say garbage because I mean that from a script perspective, the human storylines in this film are not interesting.
And there's so much of them. Like that's my problem. I'm not saying that the human stuff has to be good. I acknowledge that the human stuff's probably going to suck. Then cut back on the human stuff. Yeah. Like we don't need if it's not good, just scale back. You can't tell me, don't care about the human stuff of the movie. It doesn't matter. But have so much human stuff in the movie. Right. There was a great tight 90-minute movie somewhere in this 2-hour movie.
Well, I was rewatching on the couch with Lauren, and I looked over at Lauren and I said, this is not as bad as I remembered it being, and then they'll cut back to the Millie Bobby Brown, Tyree Henry story. I'm like, this is why I didn't like this. And the Skarsgård storyline, I think the Skarsgård Rebecca Hall storyline is better than the Millie Bobby Brown storyline.
See, I hated all the Hollow Earth stuff. I thought the Hollow Earth stuff just looked so bad.
I didn't like the Hollow Earth stuff, but it was better than the Millie Bobby Brown story. The Millie Bobby Brown storyline, and I like her a lot. I love her in Stranger Things. I love Brian Tyree Henry. Phenomenal. Yeah. I mean, we're talking about phenomenal actors.
Sure.
Every time they cut back to them, all I kept saying is, what is this doing for the story? Their storyline, I couldn't tell you after seeing it twice what they were trying to do. I really couldn't tell you what they were trying to do. I mean, you could tell me, but I mean, now the Hollow Earth stuff I didn't mind as much. I kind of liked.
You thought it looked bad?
I didn't think I thought the Hollow Earth
Jake,
stuff looked fine.
I thought the Hollow Earth stuff
good.
looked. It just looked like a screen of special effects. Like it just.
Oh,
it
no,
didn't
there was a
really
really cool shot when like Kong.
See,
gets,
but you saw it. You saw it at home. I think I think theater really would help that.
Yeah.
We discussed this off air
Yeah.
about the whole theatrical versus home, and I
yeah.
think this movie is really going to benefit from getting. To see
but
it in
then
theater.
that also brings up the argument of a
Right.
good movie should be a good movie on its own.
Right.
A good movie should be made better by a theater. A bad
Sure.
movie cannot be made good by.
But
a
I
theater.
would say specifically as those bad elements start to build, things like, oh, this kind of looks like CGI, those start to peel away when you're in the theater, and it's mixed for a theater, it's made for a theater. So I think that not that it's gonna, completely 180 your opinion. I think for those little nitpicks that start to build and make it really hard to enjoy, those start to fall away one by one.
like Kong drinking that like green blood, that looked a little CG, but
looked great to me.
Other
It
than that,
looked fine.
but it was
I
fun.
thought-
Okay, but
Let me say this. Last thing I'll say. The cinematography on the fights were amazing. That's
Oh my
there's some
where-
great shots. Great screenshots.
There's this one shot they do. I'm trying to remember the story point of it.
Do we
where
want
they
to
flip-
get into spoilers and give a warning and just discuss openly?
There's not really anything.
I'm not gonna say anything spoiler. I'm just gonna talk about a shot.
All right, go ahead.
But there was a shot in the movie, like where they're fighting each other, where the camera flips
Yeah.
completely and then goes back to the fight. I think one thing that I thought Adam Wingard did a really good job of in this film was putting you into the POV perspective of what that battle would be like. So like they're like as we fall back with the character as he's hit, or but the Kong element of it in a weird way at the end of the day is the most interesting character in the film.
He's the best.
Emotionally, like that. I will say on the second viewing, I liked the relationship between Kong and the girl doing sign language with him. That to me, I thought was interesting. I like that she could communicate with him. I like that, I actually felt a little bad when she was trying to direct him to Hollow Earth, essentially, your family might be there kind of thing. And like the emotionally that worked for me. But the film itself, I just can't. The high thing you're talking about is really interesting about leaving on a high. To me, that's what happened with Rogue One. I didn't love Rogue One enough in the first two acts, but when they got to that Vader scene and that fight in that third act, I left going, oh my God, that was amazing.
Yeah.
Then you go back and revisit it. I just didn't really necessarily care too much about the characters and the story in the first two acts, but the Vader scene is so iconic and top 5 Star Wars scenes of all time that you walk out, like Gabe said, and you go, and you forget what you didn't like prior. In this situation, on my second viewing, the action definitely stood out more for me. I was more invested in what they were doing. It was the cutaways to the humans. And again, it's one of those weird things, and we're not trying to be like highbrow, metaphorical critics
bad.
here. It's bad, like really, really bad.
I'm curious. I understand the structure of the movie. I'm trying to see if I can do this without getting into spoilers.
I don't think it's a big deal if you spoil. Is there anything really to spoil?
So here, there's just folks at home. If you haven't seen this for some reason, it came out last week. If you haven't seen this, skip ahead 5 or so minutes. I'm just going to discuss some of the way that the movie's structured, which will kind of spoil a thing that's kind of already known, but just in case. Spoiler warning. There's kind of three main pieces to the story, and it's kind of simple the way they set it up. You have Kong and his team of humans, and you have Godzilla and his team of humans, and then you have Mecha and his team of humans. And they kind of mirror every storyline with those humans, and it's just a 3-piece kind of act playing out. And I want to say mistake. I think the choice that they made that I don't love was like we're saying, is investing too much time in those. And I wonder if that was a instinct or if that was sort of like a studio directive or kind of where it came from, where there was a fear in relying on so much of the emotion to come from these CG characters, because it feels like they were trying to pull emotion with the humans, and you didn't need that. You cared enough about Godzilla. Millie Bobby Brown's interest in the kind of the story before was enough to be interested in Godzilla, and the relationship with the young girl and Kong, and then Kong himself, are enough to. There was enough emotion coming off those characters, and it felt like they were putting the humans there because like they were like, we need more human elements here for people to relate to, even though we were already relating to Kong in such a great way. And personally, I think the villain aspect, still in spoilers, with Mechagodzilla, they tried to round out, I know this is a weird thing to say, but I think that they tried to round out those characters a little too much, when I probably would have been fine with it just being like, it's the villain, I don't need to know much more, it can just be a villain, and spend more time on these guys, or just less time in general having to hear, cringy backstory exposition stuff. So the structure of it is pretty simple, and I see why that, like, when you're building this, why that makes sense, but I think, like we're saying, it's just a little bit too much time, and I don't think they trusted how emotionally connected we were going to be to the monsters, because he was Kong in particular, but the monsters in general were enough emotionally for me.
And Kyle Chandler, of course, because we love Kyle Chandler. Is Kyle Chandler the only person who's ever been in 2 different King Kong movies?
Well, Millie Bobby.
No, he was in Peter Jackson's King Kong, and then.
Oh yeah.
I didn't know.
Guess.
Where did his character go the whole movie? Like, that was...
Yeah, someone mentioned that with, what's his name? From Lost, who had, like, a line, but he had, Lance Reddick?
Also, I really thought Charles Dance was going to be...
Lance Reddick, right?
Yeah.
Lance Reddick has his name's in the opening credits, and he has one line in the movie, and he's in, like, 2 shots. It's someone mentioned, like, obviously, like, the obvious answer is probably... He had a much bigger story.
Yeah, and then just got cut. Oh, just because like Matthew Fox is in one scene of World War Z, and on the rooftop, and then that was a whole All right, final thoughts, and then we're gonna move on to this week in movies.
Quick question. So, okay, Kong Skull Island, I think, is a phenomenal film.
Yes,
it's a capital F film. I think it's got so much subtext. Yeah.
It's Apocalypse
so
Now
much
with King Kong
for it. This has more subtext than I realized it would. It's a little convoluted, but the this is a random tangent, but you made me think of this. I was really confused with the whole logistics of Hollow Earth, why it had to be so complicated.
Yeah.
And I don't know if it totally paid off being that complicated.
Weirdly complicated.
But I think there was a metaphor being made with the dueling gravity, kind of being a metaphor for the dueling forces of Godzilla and Kong, and I think that was kind of a metaphor they were going for, and I enjoy that, because a movie like this doesn't need to have it. I don't know that it was the sole purpose of it. I don't know where I land on that. But Skull Island is fantastic through and through.
To me, it's Skull Island and then the rest of them.
Yeah.
Here's my thing. Okay, this is where I get frustrated. We're sitting here talking about this movie. This is not a new concept. Meaning human characters
a King Kong
in human characters in action films like this scale generally get a secondary importance. You know what I mean?
They kind of cheeseball the emotional moments just to that's a template for
the benchmark I would say is Jaws in terms of like using human elements in a monster movie.
Totally. And but the human characters in that movie are compelling.
But the monster's not as heavily featured in
True.
Jaws.
So
all the more reason why the human elements needed to be good.
Here's the point I'm making though. Here's what I don't understand. You're sitting down in the writer's room. You're about to make a $200 million action film. Okay. Does somebody not raise their hand and say, this is not good? Like, this is not good writing. This is not interesting. Like, there's got to be many people sitting around on this film.
I mean, dude, we've been doing this is episode 159. There are a lot of movies we've talked about where someone should have raised their hand in a board meeting.
So,
but the action is so good in this movie. Like, it's so cool. Like I was like, it almost makes me more frustrated that the human story was terrible.
Well, which brings me to
more offended by it. You know what I mean?
Which brings me to my overall final complaint about this movie, which is it is what I refer to as, and I feel the same way about Endgame, even though I think Endgame is an infinitely better movie, is that it's what I told you guys I refer to as a YouTube movie. And I say that in the sense that there are a lot of moments that I would happily, if I'm bored at work one day, pull up on YouTube and just watch 10 minutes of. I absolutely, in the coming years, will probably YouTube like the aircraft carrier scene, or will YouTube like the Hong Kong fight sequence. And they're awesome, and I would love to watch them again. But they're a part of a movie that I have no interest in watching. So that, which is kind of how I feel about Endgame. Endgame is full of moments that I'll randomly have the urge to like randomly YouTube, the Portals moment. but I have no urge to sit down and watch Endgame again, as opposed to Infinity War or Skull Island, where I could sit down and watch them from start to finish all the way through, because it is a coherent, inherently good movie in and of itself. So look, Godzilla vs. Kong, it didn't work for me as a film. It worked for me as a handful of collection of moments that are really cool, that are bogged down by some shockingly bad moments.
One thing I'll give Adam Wingard credit for, and then we'll move on, is this. Sometimes when you have films on this scale where characters are this large, I don't feel like the cinematography captures truly how big these things are. It happens sometimes in like these action films. I'll never forget seeing Del Toro's Pacific Rim for the first time, a film that I like. I don't love the story, but I like. That was one of the first films I ever saw where somebody genuinely captured the full weight of what this thing would look like if it was moving through a city, if it was moving through water. And I think the camera angles that they chose in these scenes, the one thing I'll give Adam Wingard credit for is he did give me a concept and an idea of the scope of what that would be like to fight. Now, this is another age-old argument that we get into with a lot of films, but sometimes when a movie is not great, this feeling comes up more. Like, it doesn't come up for me in like Man of Steel, for example, but it comes up in this movie. They were killing thousands and thousands of people in that city. Like those, and it's one of those weird things where
they cover it by saying, like, they throw in a line because you have to, where they're like, hey, we got your order, we're evacuating the city, and you're just supposed to believe like everyone got out because
everyone's out.
This is a giant monkey and a radioactive lizard. Just assume that everyone got out.
And I cut to a shot of people running down a staircase like in the middle of the city, and I'm just like, how many people just died? But I will say one of the coolest shots in the film that I loved was when Godzilla had King Kong planted down, and they roar at each other. And then there's like that moment where they both have an understanding that they're both epic,
and then they kiss
characters. You know what I mean? But I liked the Godzilla respect to Kong in that moment, like his facial expression. That was cool.
Yeah,
it's great. Yeah, they're great characters. And to echo that, I think the cinematography in this is fantastic because he mixes jumping to a more human perspective and seeing the scale of them. But when we're in the action and when we're with those characters, we feel like we're just living at their scale. You know, giant skyscrapers are just little trees for him to jump around. And it's shot in a really great way where you feel like you're in a room with them fighting, even though it's a giant city. And I thought that was really great.
Do you remember that shot in Pacific Rim when the hand...
That's another movie I did not like, Pacific Rim.
Oh, it goes into the window of the building and it stops at that like, and then it gets pulled back out. Those are very important. Scale is a very important thing when it comes to these movies. And Gabe makes a good point because when you're in the fight with them, you're right. Like the building becomes just a little toy for him. Yeah. And like they do a good job of kind of reminding you of how large these guys are. So. Yeah.
All right, we're gonna move on to this week in movies. We're gonna move through this pretty quickly because the two movies that we have that are hitting theaters and Netflix on Friday are two movies I don't think you guys have seen yet. Voyagers, which we had director Neil Berger on, and Thunder Force, which hits Netflix on Friday. And you guys haven't sseen either of these, right?
Yeah, it's all you. Take it
away.
All
right, I've seen both of them, so I'm just going to blow through it really quickly. I surprisingly enjoyed Voyagers. It's, look, he might not like it nailed down to this sort of elevator pitch, but it really is kind of a concept of Lord of the Flies in space. You know, it's a group of kids who were raised to kind of be the go-between in what is supposed to be a very long journey between Earth and the planet that is supposed to be our savior for humanity. But the kids who were on the ship initially have to accept the fact that it's their grandchildren who will be inhabiting this world, not them. And they're sort of meant to be kept subdued. Really kind of they're made to sort of drink this liquid that kind of keeps down their libido a little bit. They start discovering that they're kind of being hindered a little bit, and they stop drinking what they refer to as the blue, and all of their teenage angst, sexuality and violence and everything come out, and then they all start becoming paranoid, and then they all kind of start turning on each other, and it really is sort of a microcosm of just how crazy and wild society can get. Look, I'm not saying the movie's great. To me, this would be a much higher recommendation if it were available on VOD than it would be if it were in theaters. If it were available to rent for $10, I'd be like, oh yeah, absolutely watch it this Friday night. It's not one I would automatically say, oh, absolutely rush out on a Friday night to go to the theater just to see it. So maybe hold off on that until it hits VOD. Thunder Force is the new superhero comedy with Melissa McCarthy and Octavia Spencer. It's from the director is Melissa McCarthy's husband, Ben Falcone, who, like, if you are familiar with their collaborations, you're pretty familiar with the style of film that you're going to get. Octavia and Melissa have known each other, I think, for 25 years. They have a lot of chemistry in and of itself together. I'd be lying if I said there weren't a couple of moments where I actually genuinely did laugh out loud, but it's not anything special. And despite the fact that it's going to be streaming on Netflix, all you got to do is literally press the play button. I would probably give you a list of 10 TV shows you should start before watching this. So that's those are the two big movies.
Do you have star ratings for either of them or both?
Voyagers, I would probably do 3.5 out of 5 because I'd give it a 7. And then Thunder Force, I would probably do 2.5 out of 5.
Nice.
So, all right, moving into BlendGame, which a good one this week. We have hashtag Kate Winslet blend. Academy Award winner Kate Winslet.
As if they're ever bad.
Oh, there have been some. No, I'm just joking. No. There have been some that are easier than others.
Yeah,
I guess I would say.
Yeah.
So plenty to choose from. My pick was fairly easy, but I'm going to start with Mr. McCarthy. Who did you pick, or what did you pick for hashtag Kate Winslet blend?
I feel like my pick is just obvious, but I also think it's a brilliant performance. I went with Titanic, and I know it's an easier choice. I feel like I know Jake's. I'm assuming it starts with an E, but we'll get into that shortly. Am I right or wrong on that?
I'm with you. I also chose Titanic.
I chose Titanic as well.
Did you? Okay. Well, then let's just all do this. Okay, let's all do this.
I was thinking that Jake was going to go Eternal Sunshine.
I do love Eternal Sunshine, but I think Titanic is just. And also because there's this weird insurgence of people that love to hate Titanic, which you're not cool for not liking Titanic. Like, Titanic is a brilliant film that is gorgeously photographed, that is held up for 25 years.
Yeah.
It still looks better than most stuff that came out. The special effects in Titanic look better than the special effects in Kong versus Godzilla versus Kong.
I don't know. The ship sinking in that movie are pretty epic.
No, it looks.
James
I will say
score.
Before we get deep in Titanic, looking over her filmography. Did you say one?
The pun.
I will mention what was the year that she had those two great movies come out? Was it The Reader and
Revolutionary Road?
Those two I want to revisit because they feel like films that. I won't say I was too young when I saw them, but I was so young that I think I'd have a new appreciation.
2008. That was I always associate The Reader with screwing over The Dark Knight.
Yeah, I was in high school, so like I think seeing those now, I might have a different. Maybe that would break Titanic, but the Titanic pick for me, again, it feels obvious, but like, I mean,
but not just because we often talk about. Okay, so the performance, not the movie itself. But yeah, okay, let's like her. She's great, and Oscar nomination. She got an Oscar nomination for it.
Fantastic in it.
Also,
that is one of those like roles, and maybe I was at the right age, but like that's Kate Winslet for like much of my life. Kate Winslet was the Titanic, and that was her representation to me. Yeah, and that's just kind of like when that sticks in your head like that, and someone becomes so iconic that way. It was an easy choice for me.
Her arc in that film is incredible. And what's interesting about Titanic is it is such a gigantic scale, obviously from a storytelling standpoint, special effects standpoint. You have a lot of characters. You're juggling a lot of different people. You're juggling the older Rose storyline, the younger Rose storyline, her whole family, Jack's storyline. And one of the things that's interesting about that film, what I always really found interesting about that film was her trying to break away from her mom. That whole storyline of her mom trying to control her life and then living in that like rich lifestyle. Who's really good in that movie? It plays a really nasty character is Billy Zane.
Billy Zane is awesome.
Really nasty character.
Billy Zane up to? I miss Billy Zane.
Yeah, but that's a nasty character. Like that dude is like you hate him. Yeah. Like they do a good job of making you hate that character. But I think what I found interesting about Kate Winslet's character is that not only does she changed his life, but he changes her life in a very unique way. And I think what you gather from her emotionally while watching Titanic is that at the end of Titanic, like, she would rather have made that decision to be in love with Jack and die, or have him die and move on in her life. She doesn't die. I forgot. He dies.
I mean, I guess.
She dies emotionally, I guess, from a love perspective. Like, she never, I don't know if she ever loves again like she does with Jack, DiCaprio's character.
Okay, I'm sorry. Good. Well,
I'm gonna go on the door thing.
Well, no, that's what I was gonna say. Okay, so it does emphasize that she did go on and marry someone and have a bunch of children and a bunch of grandchildren, and it shows this whole life that she led. And it always sort of made me wonder, like, imagine, okay, Kevin, imagine, like, you're happily married.
Right.
Imagine, like you and Lauren spent a glorious 60, 70 years together.
Right.
And you both die. And when you get to heaven, you find out that she's shacked up with this dude she spent 3 days on a boat with. Like, imagine Rose's husband gets to heaven and is like, what the hell? Like, you're hanging out with this guy. Like, you were with him for 3 days on a boat when you were 18, and that's who you're hanging out in heaven with?
They're in a happy relationship. They're in a happy relationship.
But also, I think Jack...
He was like a total...
No, but you don't know the man that she went on to marry. She had a bunch of children and grandchildren.
Oh, that guy. I thought you meant Billy Zane.
No, not Billy Zane. I was like, wait. Because she's with her granddaughter, in the flash forward, in the modern day stuff.
Right, but you would assume that Jack enabled her to have a better life, right? Outside of the constructs that she was in. I think it's interesting. He
died so she could live, that sort of thing.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Sure,
and
I feel bad for the unseen husband that is going to show up in heaven and see his wife hanging out with Leonardo DiCaprio.
True.
It's a very innocent and sweet interpretation of the end of that
my
movie.
Stay Puft Marshmallow emotions from earlier.
Which is apparently not a real thing. Like their love.
But no, she's great in the film. And for a film of that scale to have such a great performance throughout is just amazing. And at the end of the day, Leonardo DiCaprio and Kate Winslet being on the front end of a boat with CGI or whatever it would be around them and doing the King of the World moment and making that believable and interesting. I know there's special effects that are brought into it and the direction, but for two actors to commit to that moment and make it not cheesy, I think there's a lot to be said about the level of performance. I mean, we already know DiCaprio is one of the greatest actors of all time. And that's just not, that's not really an arguable thing. He's just brilliant. Kate Winslet is just as great. She's a phenomenal actor. And I think that Rose is the heart of the film. I mean, I would argue. I mean, her and,
the heart of the ocean?
Yeah, but I mean, like, they're like, you just think about all the scenes and everything that she goes through in a matter of 3 hours, like the whole dancing scene down below, and there's just so much emotion to what she brings to the character. She's living a dual life, right? She has that really, really different lifestyle, and then you see. To me, what's great about her performance is that internal battle. She's going through a battle, like she's battling her parents and family, and it's interesting.
I think a part of the fact of the story and both of their performances, I always forget that we're going to cut back to present day. Maybe it's just a matter of time, or how much we spent. But I'm so in it that when that part of the story ends, I'm like, oh wow, what a great movie, and we cut back to the. I'm
like, we got 20 minutes left.
This lady, I forgot about this lady.
Yeah. All right, so the three of us picked Titanic. I don't know what Sean O'Connell picked. Gabe, do you know what Sean O'Connell picked?
He hasn't told me yet, but he allegedly is sending in a clip.
All right, so we're on faith, hashtag if it happens, going to toss to Sean's pick.
And we book him.
Hey guys, I hate that I can't be with you this week. I hope you guys are having a really great show. I'm sure you are killing it, and I'll be back with you guys next week. I love you and miss you very, very much. Gabe wanted me to record my pick for Kate Winslet Blend much, much harder than I thought it was going to be honest with you. And I, looking over her incredible filmography, when I saw Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind, I thought, oh, that's gotta be the pick, right? Like, it has to be the pick. And I went back and forth on a couple other titles and tried really hard to convince myself that was the pick because I adore that movie. But I can't not pick Titanic. Titanic is incredible. It's an incredible accomplishment on every level. But I'm going to attribute it to Kate Winslet blend because of the unbelievable arc that Rose DeWitt Bukater goes on over the course of the film. It's as important as the sinking of the historical ship. And I think that ultimately Cameron, the technician, is more interested in the physical nature of sinking the boat and pulling off that. I'm not saying he's not invested in the relationship that's at the heart of the movie, but the actors are the ones that pour their heart and soul into making Titanic work on a romantic and dramatic level. And, you know, DiCaprio gets to be cool as shit from start to finish, right? Like he's Jack is Jack, and he doesn't necessarily evolve wholeheartedly. In fact, it's the whole point of, you know, that he just sort of goes with the flow and the world comes to him. But Rose has to go through several significant changes that Kate Winslet sells at every step of the way. From being this person of influence, this, you know, the first time that we see her stepping out of the car, her hat, you know, and her pose tells us everything we need to know about Rose. And she strips all that away, and she's willing to sort of sacrifice it and become a regular person. All because she's fallen in love with this regular guy. And it's their story that I think make us care as much about Titanic as we do still this many years later. It's a crime that, you know, Cameron had the highest grossing film of all time with Titanic for a long period of time, and I think that movie deserved it. And then it got replaced by Avatar, which was remarkable to me that Cameron got beat by Cameron. And it shows how amazing James Cameron is. But Titanic has a lot more heart to it than Avatar does. Avatar is still a visual spectacle, and I think it's really creative. But I'll put money into an historical romance any given day over the likes of, you know, a repeat visit to Pandora, and a lot of that is attributed to Kate Winslet. And I think Kate Winslet just really, you know, was perfect as Rose, and really sold how great Titanic was. And her character arc is fantastic, and she's an amazing actress. I'm not breaking any news here. So if I had to, you know, really double down and make my choice for Kate Winslet blend, I have to go with Titanic. And so that's my pick. I don't know what the guys chose. Hopefully we all went with something different. She's got a very diverse filmography, and I can't wait to listen to the episode from start to finish and find out where the guys went, and also to find out what the blend game is for next week when I'm back with the show.
So based on that moment, we either just heard Sean's pick, or we awkwardly paused the show for 3 seconds because we didn't actually get a video. But you know who did pick a lot of stuff? Audience members. We got a lot of audience picks this week, a lot of audience participation. Kimberly Block says The Holiday. Such a relatable, down-to-earth character, and also her chemistry with Jack Black. I love that movie, she says. Holiday's great.
Holiday's so good. I just rewatched it this year.
How did I forget The Holiday?
Oh, wait, is Kevin rethinking? Are you rethinking your pick?
She's great in it.
Hans Zimmer's score for that movie.
It's not better than James Horner's Titanic score.
It's not better than Titanic, but I love The Holiday. Holiday is
Everyone's great in The Holiday.
How did I forget The Holiday?
Holiday's great. All right, Clint Tomerlin says Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind, great film. But he also says, on behalf of 90s kids, shout out to her and King Arthur's Court too, which I don't think I've seen.
I've never seen it.
I feel left out. Shao Booker says Revolutionary Road. Great movie. And Mandavision, Carrie Vanderberg, Randy Buss, and many others joined us in picking Titanic. Great picks. Thank you everyone for participating and playing along. Next week's game, a lot more potential selection than I initially thought. But the more I think about it, the more I realize we have to choose from. Reach out on Twitter using hashtag Oscar Isaac Blend. You can let us know by emailing with realblend@cinemablend.com. So really,
I mean, there's really only one answer for that, right?
No, there's really not. Oscar Isaac has some great work.
Oh, no, don't get me wrong. I love Oscar Isaac. But I feel like, again, no spoilers here, but did all three of our minds not go to the same movie?
Honestly, mine went to a movie he hasn't even filmed yet, which is Metal Gear Solid, which I hope ends up being his best.
Yeah, I would argue that right now,
I won't say it, but I would argue right now that our minds all went to the same movie.
I'm between two, and one of them is one that I know you're thinking of, but I'm also leaning very heavily toward the other one as well.
I just feel like
we'll talk about it next week.
Answer.
We'll touch on it next week. So of course, as always, drop us a review on Apple Podcasts. Share all of us with a friend, and then they can be our friends, and we can all be friends together. We have a premium episode, which those drop every Monday. We're about to record it immediately after this. It's going to be a really cool one. We're doing a little game we love to play called This or That. The category is going to be action movies, where Gabe is going to present 2 different films, and we have to argue which one is the better one. Again, you can access these premium episodes and, of course, all free episodes of Real Blend, but specifically Real Blend Premium. Let's try that again.
It's hard to say.
Yeah. Again, you can access this specific Real Blend Premium episode and all past Real Blend Premium episodes at bit.ly/realblendpremium.com. And in this moment, Sean O'Connell, I have to give you credit, because it wasn't until this moment that I realized how difficult it is to say Real Blend Premium. That is a very difficult thing to say. Yeah. If you'd like to follow us on social media, at Jake's Takes, at Kevin McCarthy TV, and at Sean_O'Connell. You know what, Gabe? Throw yours out there. You don't get to be a part of the show, not give yourself a little social media
I didn't
love.
change that in the show notes. At Gabe Kovac. You can see my name below me if you're watching on YouTube to learn how to spell that. If not, guess and miss.
Till then, Kill Bill is one movie.
And Hubie is one movie as well.
Just like Kill Bill.
Right.
I'm going to say Tenet.